My dear brothers and sisters, this morning I would like to share with you about the idea of paradox. This is what I understand from the readings of today. A paradox in Christian living, a paradox of values, and a paradox of expectations. According to the dictionary, a paradox is a statement that seems to contradict itself, but expresses an element of truth. For example, this is a paradox. Make haste slowly. Have you ever heard about this saying? Make haste slowly. It is a paradox because it seems to contradict itself. How can you go quickly, slowly? But even if this seems to be contradicts itself, there is a truth in that statement, because sometimes in order to accomplish something quickly, we need to go slowly, step by step. Otherwise, if we go too quickly, it may ruin the whole thing. We have to start again. So if we go too quick, then ultimately, finally, we become very slow. We know too well with things like cooking or washing dishes. If you are too nervous about cooking, you want to cook something very quick, then it won't cook well. So we live with things, ideas, and values being in paradox to each other. A statement in our reading from the 2 Corinthians today is also a paradox. It says, "My grace is sufficient for you, is enough for you. For my power is made perfect in weakness." How can a person have power when he or she is weak? According to our human standards, this is a paradox. But as we study the three readings this morning, we will see an element of truth to this statement about power in weakness. Ezekiel, the prophet in the first reading, lived with this paradox. He was called by God to be a prophet to the nation of Israel, to a people who God said had rebelled against him, who would probably not even to listen to this new prophet. Our text says, when God called Ezekiel, he was to stand upon his feet before God, and the Spirit of God entered him and set him on his feet. Ezekiel, in his human weakness, was given power by God to be a prophet to the rebellious nation of Israel. Ezekiel was given power in his human weakness to speak the word of God to a stubborn people, a sinning people, a people who had turned away from God. For my power is perfect in weakness. In Ezekiel's weakness, God's power become perfect. Out of the weakness of human being, God gave him strength to speak to a nation, to speak about the love of God for his chosen people. But let us take notice, even after the call, the results of this prophet's work was not going to be successful. God told him that the people may even refuse to listen to him. But God would be with him even in this weakness, because God wanted the people to know a prophet would be among them. In weakness, therefore, Ezekiel brought the word of God to the nation of Israel, even though they did not want to listen. A reaping 12-year-old Philippine girl asking how God could allow children to become prostitutes moved Pope Francis during his visit to the Philippines early this year. Every one of us knows it well. And at that very moment, the Pope didn't say a word. He hugged her and appealed to everyone there to show more compassion. Paloma, the name of this girl, this very weak little girl, posed such a powerful question, such a powerful emotional plea ahead of a mass by the Pope to millions of faithful. Why does God allow these things to happen to us? The children are not guilty of anything. The Pope later discarded most of his prepared speech and said, "She is the only one who has put a question for which there is no answer, and she was not even able to express it in words, but in tears." The nucleus of this question, the Pope said, almost doesn't have an answer. The power of this question moved the Pope to call people to show tangible, genuine, true concern for the poor and for the marginalized. Look, this is the power of God manifesting in weakness. There is a paradox between the demands of our world and the demands of our God. Our world calls us to be strong, to succeed, to be upward mobile. But our God calls us to surrender, to be dependent on Him, to worry, to show concern on our neighbors, to treat others with kindness, humility, and honesty. Yes, this is a paradox that has been around for a long, long time. Jesus himself was a paradox to the people in his time. His style of living, his birth, his death, was a paradoxical statement of how God's power would be manifested on this earth through this man, God, Jesus Christ. He himself appeared weak to many of his contemporaries. They were expecting a kind of Superman. They anticipated spectacular signs and unmistakable evidence of his divinity. They saw, however, only a carpenter's son, a local boy, a prophet without much honor. Jesus just did not fit the image people had of the Messiah. They expected a mighty who would lead a mighty army, a man who would make this small nation of Israel strong and powerful. But they got a baby born in a stable, a carpenter's son, who for approximately 30 years didn't even make a stir among the people. When Jesus did finally go about his ministry, he walked and lived with the outcasts. He ate with sinners, and he made enemies of the priests and the rulers. He talked about the love the Father had for his children, for his sons and daughters. And he said he himself was the Son of God. Jesus died because he didn't fit the expectation or did not have the value system the people of Israel expected. Jesus came as a servant to men, to all. He came to show that God didn't want man of Superman ability, but He wanted men who would believe in God's power for their lives. He shows that God wanted people who would live in this paradox. He shows that when we are weak, believing in God and not in ourselves, then we are really strong. Let us ask ourselves today this very question. Are we strong or are we weak? In the eyes of the world, who we are? We are weak, fragile. We are nobody. We are but just domestic workers to serve for other people's families. Many people in Hong Kong, they don't show much respect to us. I know very well. And you know much better than I. However, my dear brothers and sisters, let us not look at ourselves from the eyes of the world, but from the eyes of Him. And in the eyes of God, if we put ourselves into His hands, into His mighty hands, and trust Him completely, His power is with us. With Him, we know that we are truly His sons and daughters. We are beloved. And we are missionaries. We are missionaries in this foreign land. We are commissioned to God to give witness here in Hong Kong. No matter for what reason we are here now. Maybe because of some difficulties in our homeland, some difficulties and hardships in our families, we are here. But let us do not think that we are forced here. This is what people see. We have to look this event in His eyes. We are commissioned. We are here with a mission. We are prophets, like Ezekiel, to a people, even though they don't listen to us. But from what we do, from what we believe, finally, they have the knowledge. There's a prophet. There's a prophet in their families, isn't it? So, despite of all the difficulties and hardship we encounter day in, day out, we are His witnesses, testimonies. My dear sisters and brothers, we are strong. We are strong in Him. And this is God's power in our witness. Jesus Himself lived out this ultimate paradox perfectly when He was on the cross, completely weak, and at the same time completely, perfectly strong. And this is what God told Paul. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Jesus lived this paradox. Paul understood it and wrote it to his followers to follow it. God's grace is all we need to live to get by. Not wealth, not fame, not fortune, but God's undeserved grace. Grace that was given by the paradox of the grace, for out of death came life. My dear brothers and sisters, I would like to ask you to do me a favor, or to do you a favor, or to do God a favor. Let us repeat this verse and keep these words in mind. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9. Can we all together repeat this verse? Okay, let us do it together. 1, 2, 3. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9. It seems that we do not trust God very much, because we keep our voice too low. It should not be. Okay, let us do it once again. Loud voice. Okay, 1, 2, 3. My grace is sufficient to you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Second Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9. Yes. If I don't accompany you with this microphone, can you repeat it again? Of course, because we are El Shaddai, isn't it? Okay, you do it. 1, 2, 3. Second Corinthians 9. Wow, very good. Let us give ourselves an encouragement. Yeah. My dear sisters and brothers, let us pause for a moment and keep this verse into our mind. Always be in His power.